My name's Tim Cameron Kitchen. I'm the founder of Exposure Ninja, and I'm now building a group of companies over at Shinobi Capital Group.
Fantastic, Tim. Thank you for coming on. What does Exposure Ninja do?
We are a digital marketing agency mainly focused on search, so helping our clients rank better, running ads for them, but also building them websites, improving their email marketing, running paid social ads, and helping them look a bit prettier as well. Online, I should add. All online.
And they are building a group of companies. What's that?
I've long had shiny object syndrome, and I've tried to suppress it for the last decade, and it pops up in unusual places, sort of gazers of ideas and chaos. And sometimes this has been useful in the Exposure Ninja journey, so figuring out new products and services for us to sell. But as the company grew, I realized that this being a constant source of a fountain of chaos wasn't really optimal. So I handed over the day-to-day running to a leadership team led by Charlie, our CEO. And my role now is to go and build a group of companies. For a long time, we've observed, working with so many different clients in lots of industries, that digital marketing can be a very high leverage activity for certain businesses. And we've often wondered what it would look like to go into some of those industries and actually own the businesses or invest in the businesses ourselves, and then use the agency as a bit of a growth lever. So that's the journey that I'm now on. We've started this with a couple of businesses in construction, as well as some discussions with agencies as well. So now seeing what it's like to be both the client and the agency, which is absolutely fascinating, and I'm loving it.
What type of construction business do you think is under-investing in digital marketing?
I mean, almost all of them is the honest truth. So the space that I'm in at the moment is retrofit, which is basically making homes more energy efficient. And from a digital marketing perspective, there's not a lot of it. In fact, there's almost no successful brands in this space that are marketing to consumers. And I think part of the reason for that is that it's quite difficult to make a business case for this for most homeowners. So there's actually not that much of a sort of a B2C market, but I do think that this is going to change. And with the new government coming in and outlining lots of plans to get more funding coming into the space, and with companies like Nationwide offering green mortgages, I think the B2C market is going to take off. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to be in here at the start, building a brand that could scale as the demand scales. So we'll see how it goes.
And you've bought the business?
Invested. So 50% co-owner with the founder, who is a retrofit expert. I wouldn't go into something as a sole owner if I didn't know the industry. So the fact that Michael is there and sort of knows the industry inside and out is really great. I can provide some experience, obviously, in marketing, but also in scaling the operations of the company, which again is something that in this sort of industry, maybe there's not a really strong track record of very operationally sound businesses. There's not a lot of use of CRMs going on. We know competitors that are 50 million revenue and the whole thing's being run on a WhatsApp group. So I think taking some of the lessons learned from agency world and applying them to this space is quite exciting, really. Yeah.
And so this is a startup, or you acquired a going concern?
Yeah, no, it's 13 years old now.
Okay. And when you look at that, do you see any similarities or differences between this business and the agency?
I mean, yes, in that this is it's essentially it is a service company. So there's a few sort of pillars of it. You've got the operations side. You've got a bunch of operations that I guess you categorize as admin. And so with Exposure Ninja, for example, we've always used a mixture of staff. Well, we're an entirely remote company, and the admin department, I guess, has predominantly been based in the Philippines. And I've been working with some of our Filipino staff for over a decade now. And we have a representative office, meaning we're able to employ them directly. And I see some parallels there with the construction side of things, where this isn't the default approach that is being taken in the construction industry. So I think that that's a big opportunity. And that's one of the parallels that we can sort of leverage to keep costs low for our customers by having really robust, well-organized admin and operations, but using lower cost sources of labor for some of this without compromising on the quality. So, yeah, I think that there are more parallels than I thought there would be. And there's
Okay.
other areas where I think, coming from the world of marketing, having CRMs, having defined sales processes, these things are sort of natural or requirements to work in the agency world. Some of these things are quite new, really, at the sort of retrofit contractor level. This is, things aren't typically so well organized. And, I'm painting very broad brushstrokes here. Obviously, there are fantastically well run businesses in construction, but it's not the default, I think, as much as it is with agencies.
How much of that how much of that tech backbone was driven by the fact that you're fully remote?
That's a very good question. I think a lot of it. And um, from the very, very early days of the business, I've been very conscious that from Exposure Ninja, the agency, I've been very conscious that we can grow only as fast as our processes can scale. I think when you're in an office, if you need somebody to do something, you can just lean over the table and say, "Hey, can you just do this for me?" And they say, "Well, how do I do that?" And you, "Oh, come on, I'll just quickly show you." Um, when you're in a remote environment, that takes a lot longer, and it requires coordination to have any of those conversations, right? So I think we've always been very process driven at Exposure Ninja. So writing task lists for the most common tasks that we do, everything across the business, probably 400 different task lists for every aspect of digital marketing, and each of these task lists come with training and checklists, and we have to be that way because when you have an organization of 80, 100 people, if you have like five of them who are going off piste and doing things their own way, you don't necessarily see that because they're not in the room with you. So I think we've sort of needed to evolve that in order to survive, and then that then becomes quite a useful skill, I think, to apply to other businesses in other areas.
Wherever you've ended up in terms of keeping those processes and checklists, what tool do you use?
Um,
Or
well,
tools?
we use Teamwork, which is a project management software. I think every year or something we have a period of self-doubt where we think, is Teamwork the right tool for us? And our COO went to an operations meeting, and basically everyone just sits around complaining about their project management software and talking about how they're ready to move on to the next one. And we sort of concluded from all of this that it's not the project management software, it's how you're using it. So we use Teamwork because it allows us to define task list templates, but it's imperfect, but it does what we need to. And if we keep on cracking the whip, everyone pretty much uses it how they're supposed to.
And how old's Exposure Ninja?
I started it in late 2012, early 2013, so about 12 years old.
Okay. And remote first from day one?
Yes, from day one. Actually, pre day one, I was building websites on my own freelance before that, and I just I'm quite an introvert. My career before Exposure Ninja was drumming. I was a professional drummer, and
Okay.
in the world of drumming, if you're a professional drummer, you would go to a studio and record for people. I didn't really like that. I thought I could get higher utilization if I stayed in my studio and people would send me their songs online and I'd record them and send them back, because this would mean I could do like 8 sessions a day rather than one, and I'd rack up less mileage. So that's sort of how I worked, and that's always been my approach from there on. Really, the less time I spend traveling, the more time I can spend doing productive work. So let's just use that model and see how far we can get.
And in when you started then, so rarer than it is today in terms of an approach. And how big's the business now?
We're a team of I think 80 or so. We've been as big as 100, but
Okay.
we're down around 80. So we we've tested lots of different, I guess, staff makeup
Okay.
over the years. We went for a period where we had a core team, and then we had lots of freelancers, and some of these would be, offering a few hours a day, or up to basically full time, but just on a freelance basis. And then over time, what we've actually done is increase the number of employees. So that's our sort of an employee count rather than lots of freelancers built in as well. We find that tends to, again, because if you're working through the same processes, having stable employees that are always here, although you could just sub out individual task lists. We find that stable, full-time employees that are always with the business working on the same clients generates better results for clients. So we try and build that stability in now.
And are a team in the Philippines employed directly by you, or and is that what you've done all the way through? Or
No, we didn't do that all the way through. We've only done that in the last year or so. So
okay,
it's actually quite complicated. They are set up, they are full employees of Exposure Ninja through something called a representative office.
okay,
And if I can remember it right, I think we were one of the first UK companies to set up a representative office. It was basically like, we're also a B Corp. And I thought the B Corp would be like the ultimate admin boss. But no, setting up a representative office in the Philippines, that was the ultimate admin boss and included all sorts of things, going to banks in the Philippines and getting various certifications and all this stuff. Absolute nightmare. But in the Philippines, if you're not sort of directly employed, then things like healthcare are quite difficult. And we'd had situations over the years where some of the team had a particular healthcare challenge. I remember someone whose baby was born prematurely, and what happens is they ask their friends and family for money basically to fund the hospital costs, and they're extortionate. So we ended up just paying for the hospital costs. But if we actually have a representative office and we employ these people, then there's a sort of a program that they get access to, which means their hospital costs are covered. So that's why we ultimately made the choice.
and why Philippines is? I've got a client who's got about 500 employees in the Philippines, smart sourcing, and we've had Mike, the CEO, on the show before. But why the Philippines? It's not a usual, it's not the normal choice for a UK business.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I worked with some Philippine staff very early on in our journey and found the level of English is incredibly high. There's also a very good cultural match as well. Um, and honestly, like when we're talking to our Philippine staff online, they just feel like they're just part of the company. That it doesn't feel any different. So if you're talking to someone who might be across the city from you, or across the UK, so we've just felt that there's quite a good cultural match there. We do have remote staff in other countries as well, but Philippines has been our sort of our predominant partner really for those reasons. We also hired someone relatively early on who was Filipino based in the UK and actually had a physical office in his family's compound in the Philippines. So we actually had people sat in an office at one point before deciding that was unnecessary.
We were talking, but before we were recording, about your conversations with other agency owners who feel over a barrel by their employees in terms of work location. Can we?
Mm.
What are you? When you speak to people, are people agency owners? Are they back in the office? Have they gone remote? Are they hybrid and hating it? What's the?
Yeah, I think hybrid and hating it is a pretty good sort of summary, really. I mean, most of them that I talk to they're either hybrid or they've gone remote. And I don't think they've realized yet what going remote without the proper sort of systems in place might do. The ones that are hybrid, the story seems to be really they in their hearts would like people to come back into the office a bit more full time.
Mhm.
But the staff have basically said, nope, you can't make us. And they don't really know how to get over that. And I think this is a story that we see played out in business more generally, right? We see, some of the banks and some of the larger companies mandating teams are returning to the office 5 days a week. And this makes a great news story, and everyone complains and says, oh, you're going to lose so many staff. And then guess what? They don't. And everyone just sort of quietly goes back to the office 5 days a week. So I think that there's a lot of that sort of sentiment amongst business owners. I think you said something it was really smart, and it's exactly how I feel about this, that companies are either remote first or they're in person first. And when I've been talking to potential acquisition targets from agencies, I've been saying to them, I don't care whether you're remote or you're in person. I think every agency or every business has a bit of a DNA. So our DNA is remote first, and we have all the processes in place. We hire for that. When we're interviewing people, we make sure that they're going to be okay with that. I think we probably skew a lot more introvert. Because those sorts of people are attracted by a remote first environment. We have had people where they've said, just doesn't work for me. I can't stand this. I need to get in an office. I'm a social being. I need to talk to people and that type of thing. And that, that's absolutely fine. We recognize that some people need that. I think the difficulty comes if you've been hiring from an in-person environment and you've been hiring with that expectation with your team, and then you try and send them home where some of them might be working in a bedroom or in a kitchen or in a shared house. Like, unless people are actually ready for that, that can be a really suboptimal experience for them. So I think it's about where the DNA of your agency is. And if you want to change that over time, that's cool. But recognizing that it takes a long time and you might actually have a different team at the end of that process to how you had it at the start.
It's interesting when, as you were talking there, you said, look, I'm an introvert. I set up a remote first business. In my relatively small sample size of clients I've worked with over COVID, I think all of our clients, bar one, which was fully remote before COVID, those that have ended up becoming fully remote are where the CEO was an introvert, spent COVID 2 years working from home, and then went, I have no desire to go back to an office. And therefore, this business will become fully remote. Because I was sort of pressured to do it because there was an expectation we'd have an office. And so, I see those
Mm.
clients have got rid of all of their office space. But the employees, or many of the employees, are going, well, that's great, but we'd actually like to meet up and have somewhere to hang out.
Yeah.
And
Well,
do
right. It's
and
like, good for you. You want to work from home. Great. What does that mean I have to?
Indeed. So I just think it's fascinating. And of course, there's some great studies from 70s and 80s that just show that remote workers end up being in a hybrid world where some people are in the office and some people aren't. If that's the version of hybrid, as opposed to being in the office 3 days a week, which isn't really hybrid. That's like being in the office. That's in the office. That's not hybrid.
Yeah.
That's that's just we are in the office. Then people struggle to get promoted and get pay rises because they're just not noticed. So it's interesting. It'll still play itself out. I see when I'm talking to clients and they're making redundancies, or they're doing a riff. They're the people who are furthest away because they never come in because they can never do anything. You know,
Yeah.
there's a sort of solidifying back to the core happening in a number of businesses.
I completely agree. And I think in order for a pure remote to work, there is still a social aspect that is important. And we have to work much more consciously at things like making sure that those conversations happen and making sure that people have a friendship group at work. Because for some people, that is where they make friends. That is their only source of meeting new people. So we in Slack, we have a water cooler channel, and that is designed to replicate the in-person conversations that you have over the water cooler. And we have buddy systems, and we have mentor programs, and we have meetups, and we make sure that, every team is having some sort of meeting which isn't just work stuff. But that, you have to work consciously at these things. They don't just happen in a remote environment, whereas they do in person. And like you say, if people are working in person, they're building those relationships, and staff have more proximity to their managers, whereas the remote person over here, there's no initiative that connects them to their manager at all. Well, when it comes to getting a promotion, if that business doesn't have a logical score-based approach to getting that promotion, chances are the person who has greater proximity is going to get that job. So then you end up with a really imbalanced system where people, even if they want to work remote, don't feel that they can, because then they're at a disadvantage. So I think that's one of the sort of messy intersections of remote and in person that I haven't seen anyone really nail properly. You imagine the conference room, and there's all the people sat around, and then there's someone on the screen at the end, and the connection keeps cutting out, and they get talked over all the time. Like, how is that a good
Do you
environment?
know,
That just, yeah.
you just described most of my working life, where I was the guy in the UK working for a North American company. That was that was, but that was it. And at Rackspace, it was audio, and then at Pier One, it was video a bit. But most of the time, you're just on an audio link, and after about 5 minutes, everyone in the conference room completely forgets you're there. And occasionally you speak and they go, oh, Dom's still here. Oh yeah, Dom, sorry. What do you think? You spend
Wait, is this thing on?
hours, spend hours just, yeah, at the end of a terrible end, awful. I have deep sympathy for people. And it's worse for the people in the room as well, right? Because like the conference room would be easier if there was nobody connected. We
Yes.
run sessions for clients on the farm, and from time to time, somebody will be remote, and it's like it's harder for everybody.
Yeah. Secretly, everyone wishes that the connection would just fail.
Permanently stay down. Yeah.
Yeah, not because that person doesn't have anything to add, but it's really difficult, isn't it, when you're talking to a person and a screen? That's just,
Yeah.
it's horrible. Horrible. I mean, there's a business opportunity for someone here. Maybe we'll have avatars and like those robot things, or there's going to be some solution to this. I'm sure Zuckerberg would sell it as a use case for his metaverse, but at the moment, I don't know if it's working.
Let's pick your brains around you. Well, there's two things actually I wanted to pick you, but actually I'm gonna dive in. You said Charlie, your CEO, is now running the business.
Yes.
So tell me about that. So you got to about 100 people and you thought, I don't want to run the company anymore.
Yes. Charlie came in as an entry level content writer in 2014. And it was quickly apparent that she had the bits that I didn't have. So I'm very ideasy, I could have ideas all day, every day. I'm quite sales oriented. Charlie is very operations. She's very process driven. I'm default yes, she's default no. And I could see that this was a really useful combination. So I said to her, I'm just starting this digital PR service. Do you want to run it? And she said, oh, yeah, go on. And great. It did really well. So eventually she became general manager, then COO, and then last year CEO. So where I'd sort of got to was I felt like running Exposure Ninja, I was mostly focused on the marketing side of things because that's what I enjoy and that's what I'm good at. All of the day-to-day running of the company, I wasn't really that involved with. I always had a bit of self-consciousness about this because, I get the job description of a CEO up and think, well, I'm not doing 80% of that. So a couple of years ago, I'd built a senior leadership team and I tried to quit. I said, guys, I'm not this. Like, this company needs a CEO and I'm just not it. And they said, Tim, don't worry. What we'll do is you do the bits that you want to do and we'll fill in around the rest. There's no standard model of a CEO. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. That's good. That's cool. All right, fine. Yeah, I'll just do the bits. But then a year later, I realized, this company still doesn't have a CEO. It's all well and good saying they'll fill in the rest, but there needs to be someone who's doing like the core aspects of the CEO, setting the vision, making sure everyone communicates, talking to all the team to work out the direction that the company's going in. I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to go off on my own, have my ideas, and then send someone a Google Doc and then they execute it, right? That's really what I wanted to do. And that's what I was good at. Anything else was just suboptimal. I realized if there was a CEO job description, no way on earth would I apply for it. Even if I did apply for it, I'd never get it. So therefore, I needed to take myself out, go and professionally pursue shiny objects, and leave this thing to people who are more suited to being CEO. And it's one of the best things I've ever done. I'm happier, the company's happier. Charlie's an amazing CEO. When I look at some of the senior leadership team meetings, if I go and watch some of the recordings of stuff they do, the conversations are fantastic. It's being run better than I could have run it. And I'm so glad I did it. I just wish I'd done it earlier.
And do you still have any input on the strategy and the vision?
So how I set it up with Charlie is, right, you run it. If you want my feedback on anything, if you want my thoughts, I'm here. So it's up to her. So I'd never say, we need to go and do this, we need to go and do that. I would ask questions if there's something that maybe I don't agree with or something that I think we could be doing differently. I'll ask questions, but I never force it on her because she's got goals that she's running the company to. I can't then dictate how she achieves those goals. That's not fair. So it helps that that they say you're either a micromanager or an abdicator, right? Those are the two ends of the spectrum. I'm like massively over to the abdication side. So that works for me perfectly. I'd rather just let her run it. And then if she needs anything from me, just, give me a shout. I'm always here to help.
And what metrics does she have to deliver to you? Are you the shareholder?
Yeah. I'm the shareholder. Yeah. So it's owned by the whole co, which I own. So the metrics she needs to deliver are revenue and EBITDA, and
Okay.
that's it. How we get there is up to her, really.
And you're happy with what she's doing? Might not be what you would have done if you'd been there, but has it gone in an interesting direction that you wouldn't otherwise have gone in?
I'd say it's more stable.
Right.
So it's like, the steering is heavier. It's more stable. When I'm driving something, the steering is all over the place. Today we're over here. Oh, yeah, but the new things come out. So I think that stability is exactly what a company needs in order to be able to grow long term. I think that sort of whiplash from what's the latest thing Tim's been looking at today is not helpful. So I'm very happy with how it's going.
Well, in that case, let's get into that latest thing you've been looking at. One of the things I was picking your brains up again before we were recording was the impact of AI on search. And search is something you're into and you're interested in still. What do you think is going to be, is Google doomed?
Yeah, I think looking at the timeline is really useful to help us understand where we are. So Google was absolutely fine until ChatGPT came out in November 2022, right? And then all of a sudden, a lot of people in the world of marketing thought, oh my gosh, this is finally something that looks like it could challenge Google's dominance. And some people started using it, I guess, for that. We've also got a kind of parallel thing going on, which is people searching on TikTok, for example, TikTok being their sort of primary search method. So as this sort of happened, we saw Google respond very quickly and in a very rushed way. So they decided that in order to sort of combat the threats, these two threats that were going on, they needed to start building some of this functionality into their search. So they built something called SGE, Search Generative Experience, which is AI results in their search engine. And then they built Perspectives, which is basically TikTok and YouTube Shorts in their search engines. They said, right, if TikTok's going to do this, OpenAI is going to do this, we're going to build all of this into our search engine. And they did that. And as soon as they started testing this, we jumped on it. We figured out how to hack SGE to get our clients ranking in it. We figured out how to change its answers to make them more fair. We figured that out very quickly, and we were the first agency in the world to share a process for exactly how to do that. That was in November last year. And then in June this year, Google released its AI overviews, which is basically SGE, but taking it to the public. So taking this functionality out to the public where you could ask Google a question, it will give you a long generative AI answer. And it was almost universally met with hatred, I would say. There were some well-publicized cases of it, telling people to eat rocks or glue cheese onto a pizza. And the publishers hate it because it's potentially going to take away traffic from going to their websites. Users didn't seem to like it, but Google are very committed to this being the future of search. And the CEO has said very publicly in every earnings call for the last year that this is the future. Everyone is loving it. The metrics are really good, honestly, guys, without giving any metrics, of course. So in the last week, then ChatGPT or OpenAI has announced that it's got its own search engine. We know it's been working on a search project for a while, and it's called Search GPT. Where does that leave us today? Well, Google's revenue from search is higher than ever. There seems to be no measurable impact on Google's market share. Perplexity is supposed to have killed Google. It hasn't. Bing built ChatGPT into its search results about a year ago. No noticeable impact. Bing's market share has gone from 3% to 3.74% after Satya Nadella said he was going to make Google dance. And Google is the big dog. Google is completely dominant. And honestly, I think that every time one of these new technologies comes out, it's so easy to say, this is going to be the thing that kills Google. And it just hasn't. So far, it just hasn't done that. And I think, right, two things. I think, firstly, in order for you to go to a different search engine, the search experience has to be not 10% better. It has to be 10 times better, right? Because we're all used to just typing in our address bar, going to our default search engine, or Google's our home screen or whatever. So in order for it to be different, it has to be like 10 times better. It can't just be incrementally better. And at the moment, it's not, except for a few searches. So if you're searching for a really long tail query, something that's very complicated, or you want to stack lots of searches on top of each other. So search GPT example, what are the festivals that I can go to in a particular city in the US in August? That's a very difficult search for Google to answer without generative AI. Whereas what generative AI can do is it can piece together loads of different searches and feed you the output. Although actually, interestingly, in OpenAI's demo, it actually included wrong information in that search results.
That sounds like a search that I did in ChatGPT. My sister-in-law was landing at Heathrow. And so I said, right, what's the quickest way to get Mary from Heathrow to Southampton? And it said, you go to the station at Heathrow and you get on the train and you get off. Except there is no train from Heathrow. Not, there isn't even a station, let alone there's no station and there's no trains. So other than that, it was all perfect. I mean, just completely made it up, right? Just,
Yeah,
whereas what you really need is you need to be able to get a search that gets you to train line, and you can look on to find out that there are in fact no trains from Heathrow.
I think one of the questions that we haven't asked is what is search good at and what are LLMs good at? And I think LLMs are fantastic when you feed them. The more context you feed them, the better, right? So the more information you give them, the better the results, because then it can look for patterns. It can look across its understanding of the world and the concepts there and find patterns and give you a tailored answer. If you give a search engine a long query, it sucks because it's trying to find that specific query in its index and it won't. So search engines are really good for sort of short, simple queries where you want a factual answer from a trusted source. I think LLMs are really good at brainstorming and coming up with new ideas. Hallucinations are not a bug, they're a feature. Like that's what they do. They come up with creative ideas. So I use Claude or ChatGPT all day long to brainstorm different things, whether it's, acquisition offer structures or company structures and, things like this, stuff that I'd really find it difficult to research on Google. But when it comes to factual things like what's the best type of lawn seed to use on my lawn, I'm going to Google for that because I can also verify the source of that information. And I think it's a nuance that people who declare the end of Google are failing to take into consideration here. And for that reason, I think that there will always be, I didn't think this a year ago, but I think there will probably always be like a web search thing that looks kind of like Google, really.
Do we know how ChatGPT is expecting to make money from GPT search?
No, we don't. Sam said that he's pretty against the ad-supported model, which, I mean, it's like $160 billion a year for Google, isn't it? So that's the other thing. So,
Because it's
ChatGPT,
expensive. It's expensive to have loads of Nvidia stuff in data centers running red hot and paying the electricity bill to cool them.
it costs 10 times as much to serve a ChatGPT answer as it does a Google search. And Google's got, like, in some cases, we do advertising for like personal injury lawyers. Well, they might be paying $50 a click for that search traffic. Like, where's ChatGPT's equivalent of that? You're saying $20 a month for however many people that, they're rumored to be losing billions of dollars a year already. So yeah, I don't know. Eventually you can't argue with the money, can you? I don't know if,
Well,
who
let me.
knows?
You were saying some of the things that you use Claude and ChatGPT for. What else? What other use cases or other bits of AI trickery are you finding helpful and useful to run your business or your life?
So I think the most common use case for something like Claude would be, I don't know if you know the projects feature where you can upload multiple pieces of content into the context. So you can upload a certain number of documents. So for example, in the construction business, there's a lot of regulation and there's a lot of rules and new funding things. And the government produces these huge long documents, which are just horrible. So what I do is I set up a project in Claude where I put all of these in. I put some context about the business. I can put like email threads in there, call transcripts in there. And then when I next talk to someone about that topic, if they ask me a question like, oh, would this particular project be suitable for Eco4 funding? I've already sort of mini trained a model on that topic. It's got all the context. It's got the eco for, the funding and the policies, and it's got some examples and things like that. So the output that you get from that is really reliable and really tailored and really fast. Whereas like going to Google for that would be very difficult, and having to read through all the documentation yourself would be very difficult as well. So it's those types of use cases, maybe putting in a transcript of a or putting in a few call transcripts, where we talked with clients, or different members of the team have talked with clients, and they've okayed us to use the transcripts and they've okayed us to use AI. But if we put all of those transcripts in, and then we say what are the opportunities here, or what are the commonalities here, or how might we use this particular strategy, it's then really good at going through thousands of words of information to bring out things that we might otherwise not spot, or would take us hours to spot.
Yeah, I've been using it recently in a similar context for recruitment. So we've got a job spec, we've got people's CVs, we might have some assessments we've done, and then just being able to say what question should we ask them at interview?
Mm,
Where is there a mismatch between their skills and the experience that we're looking for? Um, or from a personality perspective, where is there a mismatch between how they show up on the assessment and what we were hoping for? And how do we dig
right.
into some of that? So, because most people doing interview have had no interview training at all. And, they just sit down and chat with people. And
Yeah.
then they're
And
surprised when people don't turn out to be what they hoped.
it's difficult work, isn't it? Thinking about an interview, thinking about a job spec, thinking about what you need from the person. It's really difficult to do that. And it's not to say that we can't do that, but it's a very high bandwidth task. You could probably only do 3 or 4 of those a day before you're done. Whereas if it's almost like you've got a bionic brain, isn't it? If you've got an AI model that's helping you with that, you can get a great result from that exercise at 4 p.m. on a Friday, when otherwise you might have to move that into the next week because it would just take too much bandwidth to sort of run. So I find it's really helped with productivity in that way, really.
Do you interview remotely, you never meet people face to face to hire them?
Almost always, yeah. Yeah. We hired recently a sales director, and we met them in person.
Why
Um,
did you meet them in person versus just doing it remote?
because we anticipated that that role would include more in-person meetings than most of the roles in the company. So in-person meetings with clients, and we basically wanted to make sure they didn't have any in-person quirks, I guess.
I was just thinking because during COVID, I ended up working with clients who I obviously hadn't met face to face, and then I met them after COVID, and some of them were taller or shorter or fatter or thinner, right? Than they appeared on Zoom, where they all looked the
Yeah.
same size on Zoom, and so yeah, wanted to make sure he didn't have 3 legs, yeah,
Yes,
or
exactly.
whatever.
It's funny. Charlie, the CEO, she's not tall, and she says that when people meet her for the first time, they're often surprised. Oh, but she's got a very tall personality, right? I met the our finance director, who I've been working with since about 2011, maybe, for the
Yeah.
first time last year.
Huh.
She's Filipino. She flew over to London, and that was amazing, But you don't feel like you don't know them. It's just, I guess, filling in that last 1% of
Yeah.
your image of them. Like, right, now we've met. You do actually exist. You're not one of Zuck's avatars.
And so most of the time, I would see clients indexing very heavily on that, face to face interview. So, what do you do differently? What's your interview structure to make sure that how often do you get it right? Do you know?
Yeah. We don't have a statistical thing about how often we get it right. I don't know if we actually categorize us getting it right or not at all, actually, which is an interesting question. We typically have a 3-stage interview process. First stage will be some sort of demo task, which is representative of the work that they'd be doing. We're just looking to see have they got capabilities. We then have two like Google Meet interviews. One of them is typically like a sort of a culture fit interview, and then one is more specialist about the task that they'll be doing. And we make sure that those two are run by different people, and ideally with a different sort of framework. So ideally like an optimist and a pessimist, or whatever the other language versions of those are, like an operations type person and sales type person, to make sure we've got a couple of different perspectives on everyone. And then we score everyone based on criteria. So we give, for each question, we have the things that we're looking for, and we give each one a score, and then we make our hiring decisions based on scores at the end of the day, to try and make it as equal as possible.
Do you do some sort of screen at the beginning, or is that sort of task based interview thing is the first thing?
Yeah, so we have someone who does the recruitment internally who will like pick out the ones that we
Right.
want to
Okay.
do first, and then they get, yeah. So there is a guard at the gates that makes sure we're only sending out demo tasks to people who we think could be good.
And
Yeah.
what type of demo tasks are you getting people to do?
Usually something that's representative of the role. So if we're hiring on a sales role, for example, our sales process includes recording video breakdowns of people's websites and their digital marketing. So we'll just get them to do that. And the reason is because, firstly, we want to check they've got like a core ability in that area. But secondly, if there's something that we found particularly difficult to train, so we found it very difficult to train people to be good on video. If they're not good on video, yeah, we spent months training people who aren't suited to making videos, trying to make videos, and it just, it doesn't work, and it's not good for them, it's not good for us. So
So, and
yeah,
which can't be introvert extrovert because you're an introvert and you're good on video. So,
yeah,
is there what is it? They're just comfortable speaking to the camera. Is that the thing that is then tough to train?
yeah, I guess the ability to portray as an extrovert even if you're an introvert,
Yeah.
I don't know,
Right. It just
fakery.
it's interesting because as the world moves more online, it's a if you're up against other agencies and you're having to do the same thing from a sales and marketing perspective, if part of the sales process of any of you or your competitors is to send a video email saying, "Hey, I've had a look at your website. I think we should talk about this because these are some of the things I could fix for you." Your competitors are absolutely missing a trick by not including video as a gate on the rest of the interview.
Right. Why would you ever not include someone's on-screen performance as part of the hiring criteria for a role that's predominantly going to be on screen? Like it doesn't make any sense. But I think that about lots of the move to remote, right? So in 5 years ago, every agency needed a big glass office building. Well, what's the equivalent? What's the reason for that? That's to impress clients and give the illusion of legitimacy, right? Well, the equivalent of that today is your video background. So why do you see videos where people look like they're like a hostage in some sort of terrorist camp, right? With dimly lit, terrible camera, it looks horrible. They've got their bed in the background. It's all unmade. Like that's terrible, right? You wouldn't do that in person.
I hadn't thought about it at all, but I am immediately comparing and contrasting that with, if I'm interviewing back in the day, interviewing a salesperson, I'd be with my colleagues and 5, 10 minutes in, I'm like, this person's not for us. And they're like, well, you've only just spoke. I said, look under the table. They haven't polished their shoes, right? Like
Yeah.
today they're selling themselves. Tomorrow they're selling our company. And today they couldn't be bothered to have a shave, put on a
Mm.
shirt that might, my pet hate is if you're going to put on a tie, actually do up your top button and tie your tie. And it doesn't look like Grange Hill. It actually looks like you know what you're doing. And you've brought a notepad and pen in case anybody says anything interesting. You turn up at
Yeah.
an interview without a notepad and pen and you're a sales guy, you're going to go to a meeting and not take notes. It's just
Yeah.
that's how you behave. And if you turn up and you take notes, I'm not going to have to train you to do that because you do that already. And so that video thing I think is fascinating. Hadn't thought about that at all. But I do like it when people turn up and you think, have you got no idea what I'm thinking about as a result of the fact that your ironing board is behind you?
Yes, right, exactly. You wouldn't say, "Oh, are we okay to do the interview in my bedroom?" And they haven't made their bed, and there's still their breakfast on there, and you just wouldn't get that. But I mean, Yeah, there's all sorts of tells, right? If they can't get their camera working, oh, Dom, I hate to pick on you because, but if they're going to turn up late for your interview and they can't get all their gear working, are they going to turn up late for their client calls and not have their gear working?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
this is the job, right? This is it. So you're being interviewed from the second you show up or don't show up. I was supposed to be interviewing someone for the construction business yesterday, and a core part of the role is turning up on time and talking to clients and talking to residents. And he missed the call, and then he tried to email back 20 minutes later, and he gave some weird excuse. I was like, dude, that's done. We're done. Like, if
Yeah.
that's how you operate, that's how you operate. I'm gonna see the best of you in the interview, right? So it's only going downhill from there. It's yeah, it's a new world, and people don't think about these things, but it all matters. Everything counts.
Fab. And is that your background behind you? What is that? Just a
Oh no, it's an office. You'll
ah,
see it going into focus. Look at the
yeah,
awards, Dominic. Look at
yeah.
all the awards. My sister's boyfriend is incredibly handy with building things. So I sent him a picture and said, "Can you build this?" And he said, "I think I probably can," and he did.
Fantastic. So it's real,
It's real,
physical. Very good.
physical.
So then that's why you're not disappearing in and out of it.
Yes, and I don't have like a weird fuzzy halo around my head and stuff. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
details
But
matter.
I think that's fine. Like, and that's okay, and that's an accepted. Having a green screen background is absolutely fine, and having a blurry background. I mean, to be honest, that's one of the godsends of the pandemic. Is most of these call platforms have like a blur my background feature now, which is absolutely essential for the vast majority of people that don't have the luxury of a fancy office. But yeah, all of those things matter. All of that, like the lighting, the sound, like get an external microphone. If you're going to be on client calls, get an external microphone because it sounds 10 times better. Just do it. Like, think about these things, Dominic. No one's thinking about them.
Well, sometimes I have a guest on and they'll be like, your audio is a bit terrible because actually you're sitting in the shared office space of a hotel lobby. We can't, there's no way I can interview you whilst you're sitting there and people are walking back behind you. It's just like, that's not going to work. Yeah.
No.
You didn't read the instructions that we sent you. What books that you've read along the way, resources that have helped you, podcasts that you listen to? What resources should people dive into?
I'm not going to pretend to be much of a reader. I used to be, but my attention span's just disappeared. My favorite, I've got two favorite books which have sort of influenced my thinking. Ogilvy on advertising, which is a good sort of primer for anyone who wants to start thinking about marketing. And then The Ultimate Sales Letter by Dan Kennedy, which is a very sort of tactical marketing book, but it's really useful. Even if you're like, if you was going to start a business, you'd want to read that book because it talks about the customer and understanding the customer and how that sort of influences all your marketing. So those two would be ones. In fact, Dan Kennedy has really influenced loads of my thinking about marketing in general. He's pretty old school. There's a lot of like old audio tapes and videos of him with like a overhead projector in some dingy hotel room in like Texas in the 1980s or whatever, but it's really good stuff. He's really, really bright. Podcasts, I have to shout out the Exposure Ninja podcast. We have a really good podcast. We also got some great books as well, including How to Get to the Top of Google. I quite like the All In podcast. I don't know if you know that. So some people get turned off because some of the All In guests or some of the All In hosts are a bit right wing, but there's also some left wing hosts as well. The thing is, they just talk about business and politics, and it's just quite interesting to hear from them. Other than that, I spend a lot of time on YouTube, so I work out a couple of times a day, and I usually stick something on YouTube, just learning about retrofit or funding for social housing, decarbonisation, or whatever the topic is of the day. So I'm a big fan of YouTube. I think you can learn how to do anything that you want on YouTube, really. So that's my go-to resource.
Fantastic. And Tim, I've got some quick questions for you.
I'll hopefully have some quick answers, Dom, but I can't
Okay.
promise.
What's your genius?
What's my genius? I can usually come up with an idea to solve whatever problem someone's got.
Okay. What drives you every day?
Fear of regret when I'm older.
Uh-huh. Okay. What unpopular opinion do you hold?
That following your passion is a good way to start a company. Terrible idea.
um, what's the most significant risk you've taken?
Handing over to a CEO.
Okay. Um, how do you measure success? Not in business, but in life.
Well, my three main things are like health first, because health is like the default. Family, are my family happy with me? Do they like me? Am I going to have regret? And then business. And those are really the only three things I care about. Social life has sort of fallen by the wayside. I don't really care about it. I'm focused on my family while they're young. So that's how I sort of look at my life, as the relative balance of all of those three things.
Okay, well, that might link to this one then. If you were to write your own eulogy, what would you want to be remembered for?
To be honest, I don't really care how I'm remembered. Other than by my children, I'm going to be dead. So
Okay.
yeah.
What's the most recent thing you've learned or the most recent skill you've acquired?
At the moment, I'm recruiting a site manager for a construction business. So I've learned a bit about site management in order to do that.
Okay. What's the biggest myth in business?
I think one of the biggest diversions in business is thinking that business is here to act as a charity. I think businesses can have a cause, but fundamentally, a business is there to make money, and that money can then be deployed to further particular causes. But I think it's rare that you see a business that has genuinely moved a cause forward. I think make the money first, then deploy the money.
Okay. All right. You made me think of Simon Bitliff, who says he's the Marxist capitalist. He said, because without the capitalism, there is no money for redistribution.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Tim,
And the people who are good at making money are very rarely the people who are good at deploying it for causes.
yeah. Okay.
So you wouldn't employ the same person to do both of those things. So aces in their places. Bill Gates, make the money. Melinda, handle the distribution.
Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you today. Thanks for coming on.
Dominic, thank you for your time. I hope it's useful, semi-useful to at least one person.
Excellent.